I want you to know something.
Yeah.
You're such a rock star. I saved
Thanks.
everything you handed out at open house when
There you
Jack
go.
was in fourth grade. Fourth grade, because it was
Wow.
so good, so many great resources. And my 10-year-old Sarah has been reaping the rewards. Math Fact Cafe has been awesome, and a few other things you shared. And I've let Virginia McDonough know about it, and she's
Oh,
looking
that's
into it.
hilarious.
So thank
That's
you for everything you've done. You'd be surprised what people hang on to when it's
that
top shelf stuff.
that's funny, Chris, but I'm glad I could help somebody somewhere.
WinCam,
Thanks
just
for
put a
sharing that.
WinCam just put a note in the
in
chat.
the room.
Yep, and we're televised now.
So we're just waiting for a few more people to come in.
Hey, Grant.
Hey, how's everybody
Hi,
doing
Grant.
tonight?
How are you?
Hey there.
Hi, Judy.
Hi,
Hi, Judy.
Michelle, I don't see any video yet on WinCam. They may be carrying the audio. You may be able to mute them and share it.
they are muted, but I'm just waiting for Brian. It's out, so we're waiting for him to try to get back in.
For town.
Yeah, I'm just waiting.
Tina. Hi, Jen. Hi, Lori. Hey there. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Grant. Hi, everyone.
Everyone.
Judy, we have a different view this
Good
time.
night.
Judy's dining room.
There's Sam.
Who is playing the piano?
Oh, no. My kids. It's like doing,
like band, they have going in the background. That's right.
oh, good. I'll tell Liam.
You picked
Just the kids.
sorry about. No, why? What
Sorry
me?
about that. What happened, Brian? popped up
I
and
just switched to different,
disappeared.
I switched to a different computer to work on this one.
Okay. Okay. I think we have a really large group tonight, but I think we have everyone.
Karen coming?
Oh, Karen. Said she was coming. She was going to be a little bit late. So I think we'll just call to order and get started since we're already running a little bit late. So we will call this May 5th meeting of school committee to order at 6:06. I'll keep an eye out for Karen to join us. We'll start the meeting tonight. We don't have any public comments. So the first thing we have on our agenda this evening is a report from our teachers and one of our elementary principals on our district distance learning and how that's been going. And we're really excited to have you all here this evening. I don't want to miss anybody. We have Grant Smith here for the elementary principal, Mr. McCullen from an elementary teacher, Ms. Burke, one of our middle school teachers, and Ms. Ferretto, one of our high school teachers. And so they are going to share with us a little bit this evening about how distance learning has been going from the teaching perspective and give us an update on that, as well as Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans, would you like to introduce everybody a little bit more and give us a little background?
Sure, I'm going to turn it over to Jenna and Emma, who arranged the speakers for this evening. But before I do that, I think it's important just to recognize this is Teacher Appreciation Week. And we greatly appreciate all of our educators, not only teachers, but our ESPs, ISS, administrators, everyone who at clerical, everyone who's contributed to the success of distance learning thus far. We're learning a lot. We're adapting and adjusting and changing, and everyone is working incredibly hard despite all the distractions of being at home, being socially distant from your colleagues. There's a lot of collaboration and some great opportunities to understand students and how they learn in a different way than in the classroom. So I'd love to turn it over to Jen to introduce sort of the efforts that have been happening behind the scenes to support distance learning and also the professional development that's been happening. And then I'll let her introduce the speakers and why they agreed to speak tonight. And I just want to thank them all very much for giving up an evening to share what's happened. I do want to say that last week, James Lynn and Dennis Mahoney spoke in general terms about distance learning grades 6 through 12. But I thought it was really important that we hear directly from teachers about this. So Jen, you have anything you want to add and then introduce the speakers?
Sure. I think it's what's been, again, as we look for the silver linings and the blessings and everything, I think what's been really cool about this time is that just-in-time PD that we talk a lot about through coaching and collaborating that happens between teachers. And I think this has been an awesome example of probably what the public doesn't see a ton of, which is all the behind the scenes, what people are working on planning together, putting into shared folders, putting out on their distribution lists for their grade level or their team or their department or their whole building. So when Lori and I were going through thinking about what would be great to hear from some great teachers in the district, but also people who wore other hats, that's part of what really came to mind for us is Tanya Ferretto is a fabulous teacher at the high school, Italian, and she's also been in the mentor program as a leader of the mentor program this past year. So kind of having that view from it adds to the teacher lens. Kim Burke also works with the mentor program and now this year also in the coaching role, as well as, of course, her math teacher. And Emmeline has been doing, it's interesting that Emmeline's already been in her short time with us in 2 buildings. So she has the perspective of a couple of different buildings and working as a leader with the 5th grade team across the district. And all very active in sharing between the teachers in all different ways. That's been another really cool thing is recognizing that just like the students, all the adults learn in different ways. And so some people are liking, one-on-one or just working with their grade level or like putting stuff out in the DLs or lunch and learns. So everybody's been trying different things and people are finding what works for them and where they gain the most and sharing with others. And really I always talk about at this table, now this virtual table, that if there's anything in education that's as close as can be to the silver bullet, it's PD. And this has given us an opportunity to really throw open the doors of PD in a whole new way that's really been amazing, as well as what obviously teachers are doing individually with their students in their virtual classroom now. So maybe kick it off and share, do you want to hear, I guess that makes sense because then the teachers could leave from the teachers first and then Grant to talk about the elementary piece. All right, so I don't know. I know I introduced you three behind the scenes. I don't know if you guys talked. Do you have a preference for order or whatever you're comfortable with? No preference. Okay. All right, so let's just start. Makes sense. Maybe Emmeline, if you could start from the elementary and then we'll just move on up.
Hi, everybody. Emmeline Siamakun, 5th grade teacher at Lincoln, and I was at Ambrose 5th grade and 3rd grade past couple of years. So we actually met yesterday and just kind of chatted to see where we were all at. And we kind of had a lot of similar perspectives on things. So it's kind of interesting to see the differences across the different schools. But coming from the elementary perspective, I kind of said, like, when we got hit with this, it was a very unsure thing. We knew the curriculum, but what was unsure was how to deliver it. So we had all these companies and like resources coming to us with all this free stuff, and it was just very overwhelming for us. And I think from the teacher perspective, we also had to think, what is a happy medium for these kids? Because we didn't want to overwhelm them, and we didn't want them to have too little. It's just finding that happy medium. So I know something that I do in my classroom now is every Friday we have a weekly check-in, and that's to check in on how the workload was for the week and also social emotionally, like how are they doing and is there anything that they want me to know. And sometimes I do follow up with them in an email conversation just to make sure everything's okay on their end. But now that we're on week 8, I think the biggest thing I've learned and my colleagues at Lincoln have learned is the most important thing is to keep the relationship going. We've worked so hard from the beginning to build those that now we have to keep them going more than ever. So some things I've done in the building and I've shared is the virtual talent show, and the kids love that. We did mystery Skypes in the classroom, so I continue to do those now with them where I'm the state and they have to guess where I am. I do a lunch bunch. Again, I did that in the classroom, so now they can have some friends and we do a virtual lunch bunch, eat lunch together, and they can just chat. Then I kind of decided, we really need to implement a routine. We all know kids strive on routine. So the kids get a daily schedule with all their assignments, and the parents get a schedule of the live events the Friday before, so they kind of can plan out things. And we really wanted to find a balance of live and not live, when the not live being flexible for them. They didn't have to be done at a certain time. We want them to get off the screen too and get outside. So we found that when we do things online, that Google Classroom has kind of been the one-stop shop. They know everything will be right there. On their daily schedule from me, everything has a link embedded. So they just click on the link and it'll take them right where they need to go, trying to make it as easy as possible for them. And I think within the live events, incorporating brain breaks for these little kids especially, they can't sit there for 30 minutes. So we have this, I put a virtual dice on my screen, and the dice correlates to a movement we do all together, just gets them moving. But I think the biggest thing to come out of this is our team is stronger than ever. The amount of collaboration, we're all kind of on the same page right now. And that didn't even happen when we were in the same building, but we're sharing more than ever. And I can honestly say if this were to happen again in the fall, we would know exactly what to do. We feel, prepared for that. Oh, sorry, that's my crock pot. But I know Tanya and Kim and I talked yesterday. Going forward, we said something we'd like support in is just how to deliver and what's the best way to deliver this curriculum to the kids. That's kind of where I am from the elementary perspective.
You
Thank
guys
you.
want
Did anybody want to stop and ask questions along the way? It might be the easiest thing to do. So if anyone has any questions for Emmeline.
Emmeline, could you just say what grade you teach again?
5th grade.
5th grade. Okay, thank you.
Emmeline, are you finding any challenges with the 5th graders because that's a transition year? You're missing out on sort of that, all those conversations about being ready for 6th grade. How's that going for the 5th?
So I actually had reached out to Stacy Bukaris and I said, I'm having a lot of kids in their weekly reflections saying they're sad they're missing all these 5th grade events like the pool party or the moving on ceremony and all these things that they've been looking forward to since they were in kindergarten. So she came in and we did a little lesson with her, and it was just nice for them to all hear how each other felt. We talked about clouds and silver linings, and I think it's important that they know they're not in this alone, and there are a lot of kids who feel that same way that they do. So it just opened up that conversation for all the kids to know that they're not alone. And I think reaching out to Stacy was a good move on my part, and now Stacy's even offering small groups for only children at home because I have 2 and they're really struggling. They don't have like a sibling to lean on. So she's going to be doing small groups every week across the 3 schools she services. So, yeah.
Just for folks at home, Stacy's one of our 2 social emotional learning coaches at the elementary level.
So Michelle, if you don't mind, may I ask a question?
Go for it.
So when you're doing your live event, do you find what sort of how many kids do you find actually come to a live event? Do you have 20 kids in your class? Do you find that you get a majority of them, or do you kids have other things happening? Even though they're in school, I'm just curious, like, if you're getting 15, 16, 17 kids that come to a live event.
Yeah, I actually have a pretty good attendance record with the live events. I think that's what they look forward to the most is seeing each other and seeing me. Sorry?
Am I the only one who's having trouble hearing Brian?
I can't really hear him that well.
No,
Hey, I
Brian,
wonder if Brian could maybe text his question to Michelle
Never
and she
mind.
can read it to the group.
So can I suggest, Brian, you might want to type it into the group chat, Brian, and that way everybody can see the questions.
Well, I was gonna say I do have majority, like almost 100% coming, if that answers your question. I think, like I said, that's what they look forward to the most.
Any other questions?
Michelle, I have a couple of questions, but I kind of wanted to hold them till I heard from everybody because there may be a common theme, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks.
Thanks, Emmeline.
Hey, you're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. It sounds like you have a lot of really great ideas going on, and maybe some things that you'll even be able to use after this too.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Does that take us to Ms. Burke?
Yeah.
All right, great. So I'm Kim Burke. I was at Morocco for 10 years in 4th grade and had the pleasure of teaching Jack Nixon. And I have been at McCall, this is my 7th year. And up until this year, I taught 6th grade math. And this year I was lucky to be able to teach 2 math periods in 6th grade on team discovery and then coach all teachers at McCall the other 3 periods. So I thank you for that opportunity because I know you had to come up with the money and I appreciate it. It's been an awesomely amazing experience. So I thought what I'd do is just share a few specific examples of what I've seen going on at McCall and then kind of a couple silver linings and then answer any questions you have. So I think the biggest thing that the 2 coaches, we have another part-time coach, Pat DeVries, who's the part-time technology coach. And what we implemented quickly was what we've called lunch and learn. And so every Thursday from 12 to 1, any teacher can come and learn. And it obviously the first time when we started, it was just kind of open. What do you need? How can we help you? And then we began to see a pattern evolve. And so we kind of have a 3-week cycle now. And the first week, we get teacher experts because, you know, 5 heads are better than 2. And so we get teacher experts to talk about different platforms and how they use them, kind of like a preview as you would in your classroom. And they make a screencast for the teachers explaining how you can use the software and how you get into it. There is a core group of teachers. There's a small group of teachers that will try anything you give them. There's a core group of teachers that will try something if they are not afraid of it. And then there's a group of teachers that have to kind of wait and see how it plays out. So then we meet those needs of that second tier by making the screencast, and they share that on Monday. So they have from Monday to Thursday to try the program out if they want to. And then the second Thursday of the Lunch and Learn, people who are the experts talk for 10 minutes, answer questions, and then listen to whoever's tried it. And then that third Thursday, anyone who else has tried it shares how it went. And then we preview another 2, 3, 4 platforms for the next 3 weeks. So we've been doing this for a while, and we have on average 25 to 30 teachers. It was originally from McCall, but thanks to Janelle and Emma, it's now on Aspen. So last week we had an ELL teacher, and we have had an ESP from the high school. So it's a nice example of how we've taken something and now we've kind of expanded it. And when I was talking to Tanya and Emmeline, I was saying it could be used as a model if we're stuck in this distance learning for a while. It could be a model that could transfer to other age groups, and we'd be happy to help you do that. I've seen teachers Skype a scientist during distance learning. I've seen teachers providing a lot of feedback. The feedback, I think, is the thing that's taking teachers the longest time because you have to figure out the most efficient way to do it, but also meet the needs of giving the kids feedback. Because if you're giving work and not giving feedback, what's the point of doing the work? So I've seen teachers use Flipgrid, Google Classroom, Seesaw, Pear Deck Live, lots of different things going on there.
Hey, Kim, can I stop?
Yep.
With Flipgrid, Seesaw, all those things you just mentioned, for people that don't know what those even are, can you give a general sort of category overview of what those are?
Sure. So Flipgrid is a platform that allows you and your students to make short and long videos. And so you can give an assignment, like you could give a brain break assignment or a community building assignment, like Rachel D. Simone has done since the beginning. Show us your pet, show us your stuffed animal, and they can do screenshots, they can do live video, whatever they prefer. And then the teacher can go in and give either written feedback or video feedback on that particular subject. So it's just short little video snippets like of a screen. Seesaw is a little more interactive. Seesaw allows you to take a lesson and the students can embed written and video work in their answers, and then you can respond, a teacher can respond in the same way or a different way, and you can go back and forth and you can give feedback to say, you know, you hit the main points, but I'd like you to add X, Y, or Z, and then the crowd can go back in, edit what they did and improve upon it. What else did I mention? Flipgrid, Seesaw, Pear Deck. Pear Deck is probably, it's a little bit trickier to use, but it has value in distance learning that's a little bit different from the other ones in that it makes Google Slides interactive. So if you're assigning Google Slides and you're not sure if your kids are reading them or not, it allows you to embed questions and live interaction into it. And it also has an embedded SEL component automatically. So that's the latest one we're trying to get people to try because it's a little harder. So we're kind of taking steps to get people comfortable, but that's a really good one if you've never it out. I've had history teacher hold a live Zoom and they're studying the Silk Road and the kids had to bring an object they would have found on the Silk Road and why would you have found that? I've seen a universal design for learning lesson called Signs of Spring, which goes across technology and grade 6 science, where the kids basically get outside to learn and they have choice embedded within all the assignments, how they choose to learn, how they choose to present it. And that's a 3-week project that's been going on with the 6th grade and the tech department. We've also tried to encourage the use of the language do first and do later, which came from Judy. Thank you, Judy. My team kind of used must do, may do in the past because we had the cute little magnets with the mustard and the mayo containers. But then we got some feedback that that sounded a little harsh given that we don't have the little magnets, right? And so do first and do later seems to resonate well with middle school students. They can really wrap their heads around that. So James has encouraged teachers to use that language. And it really helps because I know at all ages we have to differentiate, but I find in the middle school with the social emotional piece and the students that are struggling with not seeing their friends, that those kids that need that extra work really need those do laters, but they couldn't possibly be required or a do first because the kids who are suffering socially and emotionally are just barely getting those do first done. So it really enables teachers to offer a wider range of work. And so basically the silver linings are we have teachers learning things on technology that they never thought they would. Mary Stark shared today at the staff meeting that she never thought she would be teaching Wilson over Google Slides. And she referred to herself as a veteran teacher and that she, thanks to her grandkids, she's practiced with them and just embraced everything. And her takeaway was, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Questions for Ms. Burke? Okay, thank you. That sounds like there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. And thank you for helping us understand what some of those tools are you're using too, because I think some of the parents out there have even heard some of the kids talk about using them and may, like the teachers, it's a whole new learning curve for the parents too.
Not one thing that I created, Janine Lavoie asked Pat and I to create, and I can share with you guys as soon as I get off. We created of all the platforms we've been teaching our teachers, or all the things someone in the building has been using no matter what. But Janine thought it would be helpful to have kind of what you're talking about, a table with what's the difference between all of them and what are the different features that each one addresses. So I'll share that with you because teachers are finding that helpful as well.
Great, thank you.
I had a quick question. You had mentioned that 25 to 30 teachers have started from McCall were attending. And is that a mix of teachers from each of the grades, or is it more so from like the 6th grade? Or
no, it's an absolute mix. It's ESPs, it's gen ed, it's special ed, it's technology, it's world language. It is a true mix, and it's different people each week. We have some regulars. We definitely have a group of regulars, which we love, but we also love that it's fluid and flexible, and people come and go depending on which platform they might need more work on or don't have time to come to or whatever. But it's every discipline, every grade. It's a nice mix.
that's great. That really shows how you can collaborate and exchange ideas across the grades.
Well, it's kind of what Emmeline was saying. I mean, that's the hardest, that's one of the challenges of regular teaching is the vertical alignment between 6, 7, and 8, because our schedules are different. So our planning time is at completely different times. And so that's a definite silver lining that's come out of this is that 6, 7, and 8 can plan virtually anytime now. So the definite silver lining.
Thank you so much.
And really demonstrates the value of common planning time in any environment. Thank you. Any other questions? I think Tanya, that brings us to you.
Hi, so I'm Tanya Ferretto. Hi, Tanya Ferretto, and I teach Italian at the high school. This particular year, I have mostly juniors and seniors. I usually teach Italian 3, 4, and 5, but this year didn't have the Italian 3. So I'm dealing with the stressed out juniors who wanted to be taking their SATs and get all that in, and our seniors who, I don't want to generalize, but they might be the ones who are struggling the most actually with the whole situation, because there's they won't get another chance to do certain things. Although I realize it's difficult for fifth graders, but they will also still have middle school and high school. So I'm dealing with that a lot, which I think is an honor to be able to be there for the students during this difficult time. So I'm a bit of a random thinker. So if it's okay, if I don't really follow an order and do more of a whatever my thoughts are, because there's lots of things I wanted to say. And I don't know if I should start from the great stuff and the not so great. So I think I'll just mix it up a little bit. I did want to start with one thing that I thought was fantastic from the get-go, and it really helped me as a teacher, was when we got the email saying that every student had gone home with a Chromebook, with a device. And if they did not have internet connection, it was going to be taken care of for them. So that was a huge help for us because it gave us we knew what tools we could use for everybody. So I didn't have to think, okay, this is for the kids who have a computer, these are the kids who don't. I thought that was just a really fantastic way to start as a teacher. So it really helped me a lot. And I know that the kids have the tools they need. Because really the big way of communication now is either with something like this, speaking or writing. So we are either writing emails all day or reading emails all day. And similar for the kids, they're very used to hearing directions, and now they're reading directions for the most part. And it really has not always been easy for them. And the whole managing the emails is one of the things that I heard from the students as being one of the biggest emotional things that they have to deal, because they get so overwhelmed. So that was one thing that I wanted to say. Another wonderful, and this one has come up, I think this is the silver lining for everybody, is collaboration. Our team, the Italian team, I don't think we've ever worked this well and so consistently, and everybody before. So it was always, oh, Jewel, are you free now? Oh, you have 5 minutes? And it was very scattered. Now we meet every week. And even if we teach very different things, we make very general plans. For example, okay, this week, let's make sure that they do a speaking assignment, that they do a reading assignment. And then they will all look different, but at least we get the foundation as being the same. And it's really great because we get to talk about why we're making certain decisions, and it's very well thought through. And we also get to help each other. So we might choose the same reading for different levels, and I will require something different, but it will be the same reading. So we can also find ways to help each other. And it really has been wonderful, both academically and I'd say emotionally, even as a teacher, because just like the kids feel isolated, I feel that sometimes we can feel isolated too. And you're in the, we were told stay home and teach. It's like, how do I do this? And so having somebody else to talk with about both practical issues and academic issues, it's been really wonderful, and it worked beautifully. And we've been doing this every week now because it's really been great. As far as the students, the delivery with the students, I was very excited about Zoom at the beginning. Now it's just getting old a little bit. It gets me tired, but I was extremely excited about it. I guess one thing that happened to us was that the principal suggested, and I understood all the reasons, I want that to be clear, that we couldn't really make a Zoom mandatory. And I understood that, and I respect it. But as a teacher, I feel that of all the tools we have, it would be wonderful if we could have more students participate. I wish it were a little bit more of a default, and it wouldn't have to be all the time. But I feel that the connection that we can make looking at each other and all being together, it's extremely valuable, particularly at this time where we're so isolated. And I've noticed there was the first week, I didn't realize it wasn't, I hope I don't get in trouble, but I said, guys, you really need to show up to 2 Zooms within the next 3 weeks. And then I did redact it, wanted to know, but almost everybody showed up, so they can show up, was what I noticed. And second, it was great. But then as soon as they knew that it wasn't mandatory, today I had 4 students show up in my Italian 4 honors. And it's just not as meaningful. So I just wanted to bring that up as an issue, or and look for an answer to how can we make that visual and human connection with them. With this being said, I understand why we can't do it. I get that, but I wonder if there's a solution, maybe, since there's so many of you, if there could be an alternative, there could be something that we could do to help with this, because I feel this is what is missing. And so what I try to do a lot with the students, mostly via Zoom, but even with the assignments, is incorporate social emotional learning. So we always make sure that we check in, even if it's in English, because I feel that that's actually my priority, to be there for them. And then we tried to have some fun activities in Italian. So we did show and tell today, but it was first 20 questions / show and tell, but it had to be in Italian. So I tried to do things like that. Then in class, we do talk, switch. So I was using the breakout rooms. But that too, it's hard because I don't see them while in the classroom. I can walk around while they're talking to each other. This is a little tricky. So while we were having our conversation yesterday, we're saying that we would really like to learn more about how to deliver the teaching, the knowledge, using these new tools, and not just us doing what we used to do before, just using Zoom as if we were there. If we could, I mean, there wasn't any time at this point, so it's not a criticism. It's just trying to make it better for the future. If we could learn, and Kim was mentioning that she actually has already made a list of ideas of how to use Zoom, for example. So I feel that what I miss and what the students are missing the most are the relationships. So I try to send them videos, a Monday message, and at the beginning of every Monday, we do breathing exercise. So for a couple of Mondays, I did breathing exercises, and then we have a gratitude exercise. So I tried to talk about that, just to also keep that routine that Emmeline was talking about. So some of the routines we had in class, I try to also do them with distance learning, so they feel that some things are still in place, even if they look different. And I feel that the kids have actually enjoyed the videos. And Google Classroom, so that also brings me to the importance of organization at this time, in my opinion. I think it's crucial for teachers to be organized, to help that routine, and for the students to know what's coming and when. So I post every Monday at 8 a.m. so they know and they're not waiting. So I feel that's really important at this time, because it gives stability, and it also helps us to keep everything framed in particular place. So I have been using Google Classroom much more. Sometimes it has frustrated me as a tool because it takes forever, click, click, click a million times. But I do see my son also, who is a student in Winchester. It is wonderful. It seems that most teachers are using Google Classroom. So the kids, first thing in the morning is they know they're going to check their email and they check Google Classroom. And then everything goes from there. And I think that's been very successful to everybody have at least that starting point. One thing that I didn't really used to do before, but I've been doing now, it's again to keep the connection. I've been sending a Friday memo, and I also send it to the students and the parents, so everybody knows what's happening. And I do it on a Friday, just like Emmeline, to keep things so they know what's happening. What's been very difficult has been the feedback. Maybe more than difficult, is extremely time consuming and perhaps even a little lonely when you're on this side and you get all the writings and they pour their hearts, like, why are you grateful? And they wrote, and I want to be able to communicate to them that I did read and they did do a good job. So actually, Kim yesterday told me about this app, and I did start it yesterday. And so I can now leave, apparently with Moat, I can leave messages to my students. And for the first time, actually yesterday, Kim, this student emailed me back saying, thank you for the feedback. They never say thank you for the feedback, but because it was my voice, she actually emailed me and said, thank you for the feedback, prof. Yay. So Moat. So that's another thing. If we could, so I learned from Kim. So how can we all learn from each other? So this contact is so important. And so I think that I said all the things, even if a little random. I guess this whole period for everybody was a lesson in flexibility and learning very fast how to adapt and to change constantly. So as soon as you think you have it, then there's a new announcement. So you got to do the next thing. But I think it'll be good for the kids too to become a little bit more flexible. It's not always easy when you do want to be organized, you want to have it all done. So again, we were talking about that balance. And I guess this is what all of this has been about. And it's just keep trying and learning and helping each other and trying to keep the contact going between all the teachers and the administration and with the students most of all. And I did love the parade, speaking of contact. I thought that was wonderful. And so many students emailed later when the students that I'd seen, that made a huge impact with the seniors, because I talked to them a couple days before and they all said, it's okay. That's a nice gesture. But then when I talked to them on Zoom later, I said, oh, it was better than I thought. And they were very excited. So it was nice. So I feel that we should try to maintain that relationship as much as possible. And I feel that the video and visual is as close as we're going to get. So, thank you for your time. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Thank you. No, you did. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Michelle.
Mina.
Yes. I just want to thank everybody who's spoken and hasn't spoken yet. But I just wanted to jump in at this point. And some of the things, Tanya, you were saying are great feedback, but I want to just delineate the responsibilities here. We're school committee, and so we're only responsible for certain parts. A lot of this feedback that you're giving us is something that I encourage the communication channels to widen between Dr. Ellen Emma, Dr. Evans, Lori Kirby, and everybody else in the administration and within your building, because you're the educators. You're the ones who will tell us how the instruction is going to be delivered. So I'm so happy you talked to Ms. Burke and everybody else, and I encourage that cross schools, cross levels, because ultimately you're the professionals and you'll tell us how the kids are able to take in that information. So anything we can do to help support you, but in the end, it's got to come from you, how you think the kids need us to move forward. So I just wanted to make sure that that delineation is clearly understood.
Yeah. So actually, I was learning that today with the Zoom with my students, that I look at the screen where they are, but they don't know who I'm looking at. So for some of those parts, I was actually looking at Jennifer, Elenima, and Dr. Evans. So that I learned today. I was telling one student, "What? You showed it already?" And we went, "What?" And I know who I'm looking at. So yes, thank you though for specifying that.
Brian.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thank you so much for coming, all of you, tonight. The technical issues I had before actually was going to be my question, which was, have you found, especially in a class like Italian, where listening and speaking are so crucial, that when you have a little glitch like that, can it set a class way back if one of your students is trying to give a presentation or whatnot, and you can't hear them? I see it with my own kids. It happens from time to time. And sort of as a corollary question to that, as far as technology is concerned, do you see that some students who are really outgoing in class sort of recoil when they're on a TV screen? And do other kids who were shy in class, are they really shining on a TV screen? So the sort of two parts, it's all about technical questions, but I'm curious what you're seeing.
So I feel that sometimes technology can be frustrating, but so far, if there's been a difficulty, we just switch to the next student until it gets fixed. So there's no grade, there's no stakes really. So the stress is not very high. So we just, I guess that didn't work, and we normally move on. So that hasn't been a difficulty with Zoom. I know that sometimes if I ask them to make a video or recording, there have been times that I haven't been able to hear what they uploaded. So we've had situation. I always make sure that I would tell them, don't worry. I saw that you tried. There's not going to be a repercussion, because they get very anxious about that. And that's why I try to keep it simple. So I know, for example, you can do videos with Flipgrid, but I actually am just asking my students to make a video with their phone and they can just upload directly to Google Classroom. So it's still the same result, but I'm trying to use as little outside things as possible, just so it's more straightforward for them. And then the other question, I actually am finding that the outgoing kids are still outgoing, but some of the less outgoing ones, there was one today, was a little bit more courageous today than other times. It could be the smaller group because today was a smaller group, but I also feel that there's a comfort of being in the home. And so that could be definitely a silver lining. The outgoing kids, I think, are outgoing no matter what. But I have noticed that.
Could I just
That's
tag on
interesting.
to
Thank
that? Just to add to that answer, so this is Grant Smith, principal at Vincent Owen, and I've had teachers that have reported to me that some of the students that maybe are a little bit more shy, that might struggle in the classroom with doing presentations and getting up in front of their peers, have really shined with distance learning and having the opportunity to upload a video. And just to piggyback what was just said, I think for some students, having that opportunity to do it in the comfort of their home, and the teacher is still able to assess whether the student has met the learning goal as they would if they were live and in person in the classroom. And I think that is one of the silver linings that I think as teachers are thinking about as we return to the new normal and think about ways that things might operate differently, to give students choice and to say, if a student feels more comfortable doing something remotely on video, uploading that to Google Classroom and making that an alternative, I think is something that many teachers would consider because they see the power of that now.
Yes, there's
That's
only
cool.
I think that's wonderful. I have been giving recordings as little parts of projects and things like that for a long time. The problem with that is in my case, so I'll just speak for Italian, I need to know that they can actually speak and not that they can read. And when they're recording, sometimes unfortunately they end up reading, so I can't really assess exactly what I would in the classroom live. You see where I'm going with that one? So sometimes it depends on what you're trying to assess.
Yeah. All very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I talk too much, so just tell me when to stop. But I was just going to say from the middle school perspective, Brian, as far as your question about the introverts and extroverts and the Zoom, I think, as you all know, if you teach middle school, you love middle schoolers, and there's a reason, right? We are actually finding that it's much harder for the middle school students on Zoom because now they see themselves and now they see how goofy they are. And we love their goofiness, but obviously they don't want to look goofy, so we're finding that more middle schoolers, and this is across all 3 grades, they'll come on, but they're more likely to mute their microphone and their video. And I think it's a social issue. I think they don't want people to see what their house looks like. I don't think they want to look goofy. They now know they look goofy. So I think in a way, the longer it goes on, the better they get and the more comfortable they get. But we still have a good part of the kids at McCall that are not, they're on, but they're not letting us see them or hear them. And I think that's the social issue. I will say, thank you for bringing the ruler program to McCall, because today we reviewed our charter that we made back in November with our team, and we asked them for new words. What do we want to add? And they added unstressed, comfortable, and what's the third one? Protected. So thank you for bringing the ruler program, because these kids have internalized that, and they wanted today. We had over 50 kids come to update our charter, and we did have to say to kids, you cannot be in your bed when you Zoom. So that gives you an idea of middle schoolers. If you're not familiar with middle schoolers, that just gives you an idea, but that's why we love them.
Right, and that's why Zoom is such a complicated. So I realize the reasons for everything, how we can't really have the kids do it necessarily because there are also those huge social issues. So it's great because you can socialize, but then it can create some other social issues. So it's difficult to really, I think there's probably no solution to that one.
Grant, I
Michelle?
don't want to miss out on an opportunity to have you talk, and then we'll take some overall questions.
Yeah, so just to start off, I want to just commend Judy and Jen for, from the beginning with distance learning, making the focus on connections with students and making sure that we were thinking about their social emotional well-being, and that really has been the priority. And so as I sit in on Zoom sessions with classrooms at VO, and I see how intentional teachers are about making sure to check in with students, and the students love it. They love seeing the teacher, love seeing one another. Just to echo what others have said, that the participation rate is very high at the elementary level on class Zooms, as it's really a highlight for those students, that to see one another and to see those familiar faces, that they're so meaningful to them. And then just to further the kind of commendations just to all the teachers, to see, as has already been noted this evening, but the collaboration, the creativity, the openness to trying new things. I think it's really impressive. And the teachers have leaned heavily on the coordinators. So just to thank you as a school committee with your support over the past few years. Katie Malone with literacy, Catherine Dwyer for science, and Julie McElhaney Gorman for math. They've been great. They've put out a tremendous amount of resources that they've vetted. As teachers have already mentioned, there's been a lot of things, free subscriptions and materials that have been offered, and the coordinators have taken the time to go through things, and then looking at the green prioritized standards, have said to the teachers, these are the tools that really help us to meet those standards that are considered to be essential in preparing students for the next grade level. I also want to commend the ESPs and ISS staff. So they've been great with helping with Zoom, helping to oversee and lead breakout rooms. They've taken a tremendous amount of PD, online PD, that we know will not only help them as they work with supporting students now during distance learning, but as we return in the fall, that they'll take those skills with them. And so it's great to see what they've been able to accomplish, and also just leading read alouds and things, helping to support that continued connection. So I see a lot of exciting things happening. I see that while it is a challenge being apart, and it's something that, you know, where it's not ideal, and certainly it can't replace the what can happen live and in person in school. I think that as an elementary team, we've really been able to take the collective know-how of our incredibly talented teaching staff and put together something that really is quite meaningful for our students.
Thank you. Chris, I know you've been waiting.
Thank you, Michelle. So I did have an overarching question for all of our presenters tonight, and I thank you for taking some time with us. Before I get to the question, though, I want to put Jen, I want to put you on the spot for a moment. Tanya was just talking about in the high school space, wishing there was a way she could get her students more engaged in Zoom, but understanding that there's only so far she can take that. It sounds like there's maybe an operational or a procedural expectation that's different for our high school students, because I know I have a fourth grader who has 3 Zoom meetings a week. Can somebody, and I was quickly scanning our distance learning plan, and I apologize if it was there and I didn't see it. Could somebody just speak to what's going on there? Is that just because we have so many classes at the high school and so many sort of competing classes and teachers, it's an unfair expectation for everybody to have so many Zoom meetings per class, per day, per week?
So happy to talk a little bit about that. I think that, you know, this is what we see in the virtual environment now is pretty much a mirror of what we often see in our regular practices. Like Kim was just talking about, you know, middle school kids, they're more awkward at that age. Like, so it shows more for them when they're doing that Zooming, the engagement issues, you know, that we see that love, they like literally run to school, like at the elementary level as they're coming up to it, you know, and at the high school level, that's just not the same regular enthusiasm or engagement we see around going to school. So I think that's what we're looking at. Of course, part of what you mentioned compounds it. So at the elementary level, if we have 3 Zooms a week, that's all you have are those 3 Zooms. But at the high school, even if you just have one with each teacher, that's, 7. So, I think that's part of it. In addition to which, often the high school Zooms are more content heavy and expectations maybe students feel like they need to do more prep work to be attending the Zooms to be able to do well in the Zooms. So, that may not be as much of an incentive as at the elementary level when you're in the Zoom and you're maybe getting the lesson there and you're talking through it. You didn't have to per se prep for it. Also, I would say the parent involvement at the elementary level is really heavy in distance learning because, they need to get them on the device, get them set up, get them going. Whereas, at the high school level, most of the time parents, have students navigate themselves. So, they may or may not be, attending that. And in addition to which, the last thing that I've heard to just kind of throw into the mix is, teachers are a lot often on the same kind of ish schedule that they've been on, like people, starting Zooms at 9 or 9:30. And as we all know, high school kids operate more on the third, they're up for the third shift. So, so people have been saying that they're seeing many more kids participating in their afternoon Zooms than their morning ones. So.
Okay, got it. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Michelle, my overarching I guess I have an observation for everyone tonight, and then would throw out an open question. School committees generally conduct soup to nuts policy reviews every 10 years. So we did our last one 5 years ago, and nothing changes faster than technology. All right, so we have acceptable use guidelines in our policy books with whole paragraphs devoted to players, and it's hard to keep up with that sometimes. So in the midst of everything that's going on, and a steady thread that I'm picking up in these school committee meetings is some wonderful things that are happening between students and teachers, between teachers and principals, right? In and among the leadership team, between Judy, her team, and Anna and leadership, right, with the WEA. We have policies that cover board governance, personnel, that begin to speak to distance learning, but only barely. We've had some interesting discussions and decisions made by Judy and her team around grading practices and certain, constructs. I can't help but feel like there may be a great opportunity to conduct before this gets into our rearview mirror too far. And I don't know, Michelle, if this is even appropriate for you and Brian for a summer exercise, but are there some lessons learned here that could maybe feed back to the school committee? Are there some policies that we would do well to go back and look at, to update? Are there some policies that we might even wish to create? And the one policy that really that I look to from time to time to sort of center me is the one on a basic instructional program. It's 2 paragraphs, very short, that I just want to share. One is called the fundamental skills. So the business of the Winchester schools is to equip all children with the skills, tools, and attitudes that will lay the basis for learning now and in the future. And this means giving highest priority to developing skills in reading, writing, speaking, listening, and solving numerical problems. And the second paragraph begins with a sentence that's especially useful maybe in our discussions with the Finance Committee. The first claim of the community's resources will be made for the realization of these priorities: school dollars, school talent, school time, and whatever innovation in program is required must be concentrated on these top ranking goals. No student should be bypassed or left out of the school's efforts to teach these fundamental skills. Schooling for basic literacy must reach all students in all neighborhoods and from all homes. And so when I look at something like that, that's really kind of basic and aspirational, I try to kind of reconcile that with what's going on in my district and, in my community and around the world. And I would throw that out kind of as an open question. Jen, I don't know if it's a useful exercise for us to tackle at some point. If you and Judy have a perspective on the administration side, and to Michelle and Brian, if this be a worthwhile exercise. I just kind of feel like if we wait another 5 years to look at our policies again, we might really miss an opportunity to make further improvements to the district.
I can't speak for Brian or the committee, but I could I actually had some similar questions for Jen around some different priorities, but I would say that right now we should be in a phase of documentation, because I would hate to change a policy sort of in the middle of something new, but I think it would be important to be keeping track of the things we are learning and the things that are challenges, and to be able to sort of review those policies when we're in a place where we aren't in a crisis, where we're not trying to solve a problem and create a policy at the same time. But I think definitely documenting the kinds of ideas and things that we see coming out of this, and that was going to be my segue to transition back to Jen. You know, I heard a couple of things that came out from the teachers. One was, you know, thankfulness for our past policy and support on technology, and continued support of that as well, because it seems like that in a lot of ways, some of the decisions we've made in the past have set us up actually well for what we're facing right now. And the other one that I heard coming up again and again was the ability to have common planning time, and the way that that is really positively affecting sort of curriculum delivery and the ability of teams to work together. So my question would be, is there any way that we are sort of documenting or thinking about that or holding on to that? I wouldn't want to lose that when we come out of this, because if that has been a really powerful tool for changing curriculum delivery and instruction, I want to make sure that that was, that, and talking of all the teachers were beautifully stated silver linings. And if the silver lining is that we can think differently about the way that we do that going forward, I wouldn't want to lose that either.
Absolutely agree about common planning time.
So is there so there was a question in there too, Jen. Is there a way that we're sort of documenting or keeping track of that, or something that we can articulate it in the future, and how powerful it's been?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think that's the number one thing that almost all teachers are saying has been the most helpful to them in this whole process. So certainly, you know, keeping track of those pieces, and kind of a mission we've been working on with professional development for the past couple of years. And again, you know, so appreciative that we've been able to add some more time in through our last contract negotiations, because everybody really values this time, and trying to start to say, how can we differentiate it more and be more flexible with it, having like the flex time and the PLCs. One of the lessons kind of learned from this is, okay, now how can we target some areas and still give those choices for people, and then be able to build that planning time versus just delivery of how to do something new, which is great. That's a big part, just like in the classroom, that's a big part of PD. But then that ability time to just brainstorm together and how to actually implement and what to do with it. Thinking about how we build that in more to our PD process. So almost like you could pick a couple of different pathways to be on, to stay with a strand for the year, maybe, to be able to learn about it, apply it, brainstorm, work together with others who are also working on that skill, and come out of it stronger, like going forward. So we're always trying to balance between being, you know, too prescriptive, and then being, you know, people feeling like it becomes too much of a potpourri. So trying to have that balance.
So Michelle, if I could jump in.
Yep.
I think Chris makes a good point about the core mission for our district, defined long ago in our policy, is about literacy and numeracy, and core skills in those areas, problem solving and reading, writing, speaking, listening. And the core is not so much the content that we learn or that's identified, but it is in the skills. And the beauty of the sort of forced collaboration that's happening as a result of unplanned distance learning, it is that we're starting to have teachers work together to see connections across content areas. The integration of those skills and content is critically important. And the parents who are worried about the students not being ready to move ahead next year because they might not have mastered the content, if teachers are focusing more on skills, those are the things that will be embedded, that are spiraled, that we can build upon, and that will enable our students to be successful. But I think it's also important, if we're going to go back and look at policy, to talk about some of the things that are in the pillars, in our core values around students collaborating with each other, and students giving back to the community, some of the social emotional skills that are so important that we're trying to support, that we're building through ruler elementary and middle and the service learning, that's kind of embedded throughout the district. And so if we're going to revisit what we want students to know and be able to do, I think making sure that we articulate the picture of a graduate that the high school came up with that's based on the pillars, and that we are clear about what we want students to be as people when they graduate, and the skills in those areas is also critically important. And another silver lining in this is that the flexibility that teachers are showing is really enabling individual students to succeed in ways that you could be a little bit more anonymous when you go through a regular high school day, and you're not forced to interact individually with a teacher as you are now. And so, so I think that the lessons that we're learning, that we're documenting, certainly sharing across grade levels, all of that's getting dumped into folders. And so we'll be ready next year if we need to switch to distance learning, or have some kind of a hybrid system. We will have already built some of the lessons and mastered some of the technology. And I can't say enough about the tech integration folks who are coaching. I wish I had more than 0.6 of Kim, because she plays a critical role. And at the elementary level, if we'd had that instructional coach, I think that would have been really helpful this year. That job embedded PD, that just-in-time PD, that forces people to learn so that they can become better, and not just do what they've always done, has been incredibly valuable, and also scary, and I think very empowering to teachers. And so I'm really proud of the work that has been done throughout the district. And I do, circling back to what Chris said, I do think we need to take a look back and see, and state more clearly what we're trying to accomplish. It's not just content, it's really skills focused.
Any other school committee members?
I liked what Tanya had to say about feedback from the teachers to the students and how important it is. And I recognize that it's difficult and it's time consuming, but it seems so important for students to hear what their teachers have to say about their work, and to just give like a little bit of recognition. I think that helps motivate students to keep going. I liked what she had to say about I think it's an app, Moat. I thought that was very interesting.
Kim
And
taught
then,
me about it.
yes, and then also what you said about the power of voice. I have an 8th grader and a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, and I know when my 2nd grader hears a video with not his teacher talking, he sort of will tune it out. But the moment he hears his teacher's voice, he will come back and he's like, oh. He really likes to hear her voice. And I would say that of both my elementary school kids. The middle schooler can't tell. Elementary school, yes, they love to hear their voices.
Thank you.
And the feedback. So thank you.
So we thank you so much for joining us tonight. We can't thank, as Judy started out, she beat me to it, but it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and I think that there is never a time that we can have appreciated our teachers more, and we hope that you are feeling that from the parents as well, and that you know that we are all with you too, and we understand the challenges you have of working at home, having families at home, and also taking care of the education and helping with the social emotional needs of our own kids. So we wouldn't want you to leave tonight without knowing how much you're appreciated, and just thanking you for all you're doing every day.
Thank you so much. It's amazing. Amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. It's our pleasure.
Thank you all very much.
Yes.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Bye.
Stay in Japan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, our group got a little bit smaller. So next on our agenda tonight is we had the FY21 budget discussion on our agenda again tonight. I think that there is not a lot new that Brian or I have to report to you. The town manager continues to work on the town budget with the select board and FinCom, and her latest budget projections have school committee back at a 3.74 budget, but our FinCom is still holding the 277 budget. So we continue to have discussions at the budget advisory meetings with FinCom, the town manager, select board members, Judy and Ellen and Brian and myself. So we don't have a lot of new recommendations to make to you this evening, but other than that, we are still kind of in a holding pattern there. Dr. Evans, did you have anything else to add to that?
Sure, I'll just add a couple things and then maybe Ellen can jump in from her end on MASBO. So we continue to be in conversation at least weekly with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the finance folks on their end. There's a lot of conversation, as you might imagine, among principals, superintendents and principals across the state about concerns related to Chapter 70 and other sources of funding. All indications are that the unrestricted government aid, which is significantly less than Chapter 70, may see cuts based on state revenue, but that there's really an attempt to continue to support Chapter 70 at least level funded. And so I'm fairly optimistic that the state will come through with the education funding. That's not to say that the town revenue won't hit, but Chapter 70 is a huge source of funding, as well as about $1 million in federal grants that we get. There's another grant that we'll get this week that will give us about 80% of our Title I allocation, which is about, what, Ellen, 85,000, something like that, 90,000. It's from the CARES Act. That money can be spent on a wide variety of things related to the closure and can be retained until September 22. So there's a little bit of a holdover on that grant. And as we said at the last meeting, Ellen and I are working to take some of the positive personnel variance and retain more circuit breaker and more special education grant money to retain that into use for FY21 if necessary. So there are a lot of moving parts on this. As I get any more information from the state, I will share it with you. And I've got a couple more Zoom meetings later this week. Ellen, anything from the MASBO front on FY20 budget planning?
So FY21 budget planning, we have not been given any additional information besides what you just conveyed, that that we're hopeful that Chapter 70 will be kept intact or level funded to what we received this year. I do have weekly calls with the Associate Commissioner, Jay Sullivan, who oversees school finance and all of my folks. We have another call scheduled for tomorrow that's just going to be a wrap up of everything that we have outstanding. He's been doing very specific phone calls once a week, but this from the email today, it's going to be a general whatever outstanding issues we have to discuss. So you know, the discussion amongst my folks, you know, amongst ourselves is that, you know, very hopeful that Chapter 70 will you know, be maintained.
Ellen, when you say, you said that Chapter 70 would be intact or level funded, do you mean intact to the amount of the SOA?
That's what we're hoping. I mean, that's what we're hoping. We have conversations that we've had amongst ourselves is that we're you know, we're aware that there's money in the rainy day fund, that, you know, there has been no discussion at this point by anybody, you know, that on my calls that have said, folks, be prepared that your Chapter 70 is going to get cut. There have been no, I have not had any conversations or been a part of anything like that.
Okay.
at this point.
I was just trying to determine the difference between intact and level funded, whether intact was.
So
what we had
it's
expected.
you know that this is what we're hoping for, is that that
Okay.
there is no big impact. And at this point,
Right.
nothing has been put out there to us in any manner.
Can I ask a
Any-
question, Michelle, of you or Brian?
Yep.
Just a matter of reference. In your discussions with FinCom and your understanding of what the manager has put forward, their 277 number for us is based on what, with regards to the municipal side? Is there a number yet that the town manager has presented, and related to that, where do we stand between 6 and 10% on operating reserves for FY21? Or do we know yet?
So the town manager just presented a new version of the budget last night to the select board that had the 3.74. I would have to call it up to know the exact answer to that question. Judy, do you know off the top of your head?
So I don't know how much she'll use from reserves and how much that will leave at FY21. What percent of reserves? Part of that will depend on how much is going to be turned back from FY20, and how much the town will retain from unspent monies, either if the school district turns some back or other departments. Typically, there's a pretty large turn back. So the FinCom determined their 2.7 based on what they perceived, not based on revenue projections per se or spending on the town side, but more of a general conservative approach to trying to stretch out the override for 2 years. And so their decision to reduce our ask to 2.7 was really made from their perspective that we should not add additional positions unless we're mandated to, so that some funding could be left to stretch the override a bit into FY22. So it wasn't really based on value judgments per se. It was more their perception that some of the additional positions that we're asking for as part of program improvement could be deferred, and that they're trying to stretch the override. And so when they made the recommendation and voted on it, they didn't have accurate information about any of the town side budgets per se or revenue projections. It was more of a general philosophical decision on their part. And that's their job. The finance committee's job is to try to make the numbers work for as long as possible, and I respect that. But I would have preferred that they voted our budget after they knew what the revenues would be and what the town budget was, so that they could have a more accurate picture about how much money was truly available. Because all along, select board members and the town manager had been saying that they thought our originally proposed budget was very reasonable.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that, Michelle?
Sure.
Was that a unanimous vote for FinCom, Judy?
I wasn't
It
there.
was.
I
Oh,
don't know.
It was unanimous
Yeah.
Yes.
to make it 2.7 something.
277.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
So one of the things, I mean, it feels like we're a little bit in a holding pattern until we get more information till the FinCom looks at more budgets in the town side, till we get more better revenue numbers. At the same time, it feels like we could be doing a little bit of work on our own. So while FinCom doesn't get to decide what we spend the money on, they do get to put forward a number at town meeting, and that number is based on some assumptions they've made, and that is to remove some positions that we wanted to add that they don't think should be added. It feels like it might be worth it on our side to be putting forward a memo or some sort of document detailing what the effect of not having those positions would be, especially in light of what the impact of the pandemic in the fall will be. So some of those positions, like an additional nurse, I can't think of a half nurse. I can't think of a year in the history of Winchester Public Schools where we would want an additional half public nurse than a year we're going into a pandemic that's continuing on in the year. So I feel like maybe we should be preparing some sort of document to say, this is the cost of the education of our students if we go ahead with the proposed reductions that you're suggesting, which we don't have to do those reductions, we could do something else, but this is what it would look like, and be able to get that and just sort of start the ball rolling instead of just sitting and waiting and saying, well, you sure you don't want to go up? You wait. Just a thought.
I concur. I think it would be, particularly in a year where since FinCom has even voted that budget, we've had a lot of changes to our school climate and our student population. I think that some of those, as you described, Dr. Evans, program improvements, they might even be program necessary at this point rather than improvement. I think that the climate even for us has changed, and as Brian said, there are some positions on there that we can look down that FinCom may have not valued in the past, that based on what we have coming towards us in the future, we may want to redescribe why they're so important and how they're going to be valued.
And can I piggyback on that too, Michelle? And I think you and Brian were just sort of beginning to make this point that because we're in a different place now than we were when we were having these discussions in January, it's not just as simple as sort of unwinding things that got added to our budget for the 374. So in my mind, I'd really have to think long and hard, and I'd want to talk to the committee and the superintendent about priorities that land. What I would remind the committee, in some instances in years past, and I don't think it's good we do every year because it begins to set precedent, but there have been occasions, and Brian may remember this from his years on FinCom, when the school committee did say to the finance committee, here's the budget we voted. If you're going to vote this number down here, these are the things that will not be in the budget for next year. These are the things that we will not do. And we did that, let's say maybe in 2 or 3 different degrees as the number was sort of coming together. We did that early and began communicating that, and that might be what Brian was getting to, so that by the time we go to the floor of town meeting, it's really clear what the consequences are, right? So if we say that we have a budget and we really want our budget plus X plus Y plus Z, then it's just a matter of finding what that number is and everybody's clear on what we don't have. That might even be supportive of a motion from the floor if town meeting looks to supplement our budget. So I'm meandering here a little bit, but I think I would welcome a conversation at some point. And I think Michelle, you're saying maybe a little premature to do it, but we should probably begin to have that conversation about what that looks like, because it's consequential. 277 is consequential. 3 is consequential, right? 3.2 is consequential. So what would that mean? What would we not do? Because what we know today is different than what we thought we knew in December.
So, and I think what Brian's suggesting is that instead of discussing it in terms of losses, re-articulating it back to FinCom at this point in what we're gaining by having that what the value of the positions that they chose to eliminate, why we see them as even more necessary now. Zena, I'm sorry.
No, if Judy wants to go, I'll follow her.
No, go ahead, Zena. I have some thoughts about additional funding sources that I just want to make sure we hit.
My number one question is, we have a memo in the budget book drafted, correct, with all of the requests and why we need them. My second point is, I feel like their focus is not anything we're going to budge with justifications on the positions, because we've made those justifications repeatedly, and it's part of a pattern that we've had all along, that these requests go back years and years. I think we are up against fear right now, fear in terms of the income coming into the town, fear of what's going to happen for first responders. There's a lot of unknown leading to that fear vote. and that promise of trying to stretch out the override. So I think the justification has already been made repeatedly. And I think putting in more effort, other than maybe you, Michelle, and Brian going and talking one-on-one with people and advocating, I just think that it's going to become a waste of time exercise until the picture clarifies, because we haven't not said everything that we need to say to justify every position we're talking about. This isn't new information to FinCom, and I believe that their motivation for pushing us to 2.7 whatever comes from places where we're not going to be able to convince them otherwise until the dollars and cents are clearer. Does that make sense?
So, if I may, I hear what you're saying, and I don't totally disagree with you, but there would be two rationales for doing this. One would be, what is different now than when we were making our budget in the winter and in the early spring? So things have changed. I mean, this meeting here is an example of things that have changed. So that's one thing I think that would be worth putting out there. The second is, it's not just to say to FinCom, this is why these positions are important, this is why we need them. It's to do exactly what you were saying, to say to the public, to say to town meeting, to explain to the world, not just FinCom. And and I will defend FinCom in this one way, because I used to former member. I don't think they are totally separated from just looking at numbers. I think they actually do listen to the importance of these positions. Most of them have kids in the school system. That they do value what we have to say, and they are trying to sort of balance that. And they say, well, this is a new position. I think we can live without it. And I think they need us to say, no, we really can't live without this position, and now especially we can't. But that's what I was trying to say, I think, and I don't totally disagree with you. As I said, they're coming from a different angle, but it's worth a shot.
Can I just follow up? I understand. I agree exactly with that, and I didn't make my third point. I forgot it, but here it is. When I'm assuming we're going to do a turnover before, because we usually do a election of chairs for us before the town meeting so that the new person can make the presentation. So I think that when we prepare these presentations to town meeting, that's really where we're justifying even more directly what we are asking for, because ultimately it's a town meeting vote. So I just didn't want to create too much work when you're going to be doing that presentation, and then there's going to be a lot of mini presentations and negotiations with FinCom. I'm just trying to think of the best way to streamline it, given how much legwork we have between now and Springtown meeting in June. That's all.
So Michelle, if I could jump in,
Yep.
So my suggestion is for our next meeting in 2 weeks, that Ellen and I present our recommendations for if we were only going to fund the 2.77, what positions we would lose, because some of the positions that FinCom has baked into that, Brian is absolutely right. I would recommend that we would do it even if we had to cut something else. And so I think it's time we probably painted a picture about what a 277 budget will look like, and make a case for what we would add back first in what order based on school committee feedback. Because I think that there's a strong likelihood that we're going to go into town meeting not knowing what our state aid will be. And there's have a clear delineation if additional funding were to come forward for the schools, labeled for the schools, what we would spend it on. And compounded by new information that's come on board this week related to the closure of St. Mary's School, grades 1 through 5, which may tip us over and require us to hire several elementary teachers if we're going to maintain target class sizes at some grade levels at some schools. And so I want to talk about that in the superintendent's report just very briefly. But there are things that may crop up related to distance learning, related to social distancing, that would require that we make different choices in the fall, that could have us incur additional expenses. And so this is a very uncertain budget year. But I think the thing that is a little disheartening is that 277 recommendation was made in the absence of knowing what the revenue is going to be, and the absence of having accurate numbers from the town. And so I don't think we can set the precedent just to go to the FinCom number because they haven't justified that number. That was just a number that they came up with to keep it as low as possible to stretch out the override. And so, but I think Zina's right. I think we have come to the point where we need to present, and Ellen can jump in on this one, we need to present some kind of a picture about if that is the budget, what would it look like? And if the budget were lower because of some catastrophic information about state aid, what additional steps would we take to reduce? And I think school committee is one of your primary obligations is to weigh in on the budget. And so we've got to figure this out without demoralizing current employees, without naming the things that we would cut, where people might go and start and look for other jobs. And so there are a lot of moving parts to this, but I think we have come to the point where we need to say if we were to reduce or reprioritize from what the FinCom has suggested, that we do that at the next meeting.
Well, and I think we also need to though reprioritize what we value too, because I think that the message, and to Brian's point, I think we need to start communicating that prior to our next meeting and prior to town meeting. I think waiting to town meeting is going to be too late. Town meeting presentations are going to be too late to communicate that. I think we need to start communicating more widely. And I think that's where Brian was suggesting maybe a memo of why those positions that FinCom chose not to prioritize, we still prioritize and prioritize even more in the environment that we're in. Chris, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you're making to sort of end it on. And I wanted to, if I could, sort of acknowledge where Brian, I think, is coming from, and also something Zina said. I agree with Zina. I think the basis of the 277 decision is sort of hard for us to reckon right now. I mean, the reaction to Zina, you use words like fear and so forth. I know what you mean, and I don't disagree with it. However, in all my years on the committee, I've learned it's too early to give up the fight, especially because we have a postponed town meeting. And I would just make this case that while you're right, we can always bring a number to the floor of town meeting. If we ever come forward with a number greater than what's on the yellow sheet, the second part of what we propose has to identify a funding source. And the question is going to be, where are you going to find almost an entire extra 1%? So it's why I think those continued conversations, as Brian is suggesting, are helpful. Maybe we get closer. And if there's still a gap that becomes a floor fight, maybe that's an easier conversation to have. There have been a number of town meetings where really powerful cases were made. I think town meeting was on board philosophically, but the skepticism that it even came from the moderator in some years was, you made a really great case. What's your funding source? And that's the chips are on the table at that point. So part of why I was asking about where we stand with the 6 to 10% as well. So anyway, the wider the gap, the harder the problem, because we've got to find the funding source. And that's what FinCom's all about right now anyway. So on, I guess, continued conversation, but I agree with what Zina said. I agree with Brian and with Michelle as well.
Thank you for
I definitely
clarifying.
agree with the idea of what Brian, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just have to quickly, can I just quickly wrap it up? I just have one more thing. I thank you for clarifying. I just didn't want us to be setting up a fight. It sounded like we were setting up a fight with FinCom. That's all I was responding to. But the information, absolutely agree.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think it's important that we either have a memo or just sort of a plan of why we think these positions are important. And as Michelle was saying, that we're communicating it widely and that we're able to articulate it up to, in this time leading up to and at town meeting. So I just think that case is really important. And
totally agree.
you're saying times have changed. So
right.
Positions are so important.
So we will look, Brian and I will work with Dr. Evans on that then and move forward and make sure those discussions are still happening. And I guess that leads us into our FY21 fees discussion. Ellen, were you going to be able to present on that this evening?
Yes. So Yep, certainly. So in your packets, you have 2 memos for me. The first is a overview of the fees that the district currently charges families and what the FY20 fee rate was. A year ago, we did make some modifications to our fees. We had done a slight increase on transportation fees, including a additional charge for transportation to after-school programming. Athletic fees were held steady, and we had done what equated to an adjustment on the preschool fees as well at that time last year. And with preschool, the adjustment was $800 for full day preschool and $400, I believe, for half day. For this year, I am recommending that we hold steady on our transportation fees and our athletic fees, and that we do a slight adjustment just for market purposes on our preschool tuition rates, bringing it to a slight increase of just a couple of $300 for full day and $150 for half day. And the revenue, the increased revenue would offset the additional salary costs that we would incur with FY21.
Could you just clarify that? So you're saying that the increase, so the FY20 fee for transportation is held the same?
Held the same, yes.
Same with athletic fees?
Yes.
And then for preschool tuition, the half days are $150 more, or?
I'm proposing that we increase the half day preschool tuition by $150 per year over FY20's rates. And I'm proposing that we increase the full day preschool tuition rate by $300 over the FY20 rate.
Over
that
the
will
FY20 rate. Okay, I see.
Okay. And that will offset the cost of living increase for those folks that are paid out of the preschool tuition fees. Yes,
Brian, go ahead.
So I have a sort of a question / comment, as always.
Sure.
As far as transportation fees, these fees are all designed around a bus model that we used this year.
Correct.
They're not really designed around some potential social distancing bus model. And so that's my comment. And then I guess my second comment on that would be more of an operational one for you to consider, which is that when you start collecting whatever fees we vote to have, that somewhere in the collection you put a note that says that these fees may not be able to cover the expenses if we have to run twice as many buses. Right. And just going to have to be some way so that families that have paid this fee can say at that point, you're right, I don't want to pay twice as much for busing. I want out, or someone else might have to pay twice as much. So just something to think about, because since we don't know what it's going to look like, it's uncertain.
So so we do have an option with transportation. We don't roll out transportation quite yet. We'd like to roll it out closer towards the beginning of June, so people can start, purchasing their bus passes before they leave on vacation. However, because of these circumstances right now, I don't think that we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be leaving for vacation as we typically do. So I'm comfortable if you vote the transportation fees and hold off on the transportation fees until we have a better idea of what it's going to look like. Certainly, we can also, move forward if you'd like, with the caveat that folks would have to make an additional payment if the transportation fee is going to have to change based upon the operational needs.
Either way, it's fine with me.
I had a similar question about athletic fees for next year. So if we're looking at some kind of a socially distanced school year, have we heard anything from MIAA about? No.
No, I
Okay.
spoke to Mark. I spoke to Mark Aria this morning, and he said that at this time there are preliminary conversations amongst his colleagues, but there has been no official guidance or anything released to them formally yet. And I haven't heard of anything through my my conversations with my colleagues either about this.
So as a school committee, would we need to, when we establish an athletic fee, to also offer some kind of caveat or a policy suggesting that if the sport does not run for the season, the fee would be returned? I'm putting that mostly to school committee members as well.
Yeah, I think
Michelle,
if somebody
can you
pays a
repeat?
fee for a sport.
Sorry, can you repeat what you just said? It cut out a
Sure.
little bit
So
for me.
sorry, I was saying that the athletic fee that we charge students, I don't know if we want to establish some kind of a policy or some communication to parents from the onset that if their student sport does not go forward for the year, that we will return the fee for that season. If we want to be able to communicate that up front to parents so that they know that they're not paying for a service they're not going to get.
I totally agree. I think we need to do something like that. Otherwise, people might wait till the very last second to pay the fees because they'll want to see if it's running. I mean,
I think that sounds like a prudent idea.
But the only thing I would caution against is that you might want to leave room for flexibility when you're talking about that, because what if something happens, and I can't even imagine a scenario where that would be the case, but I wonder if this isn't something that can remain unsaid but known, just in case. Like, I just feel like maybe school committee would need that flexibility if this were to happen again.
Judy, you're muted.
Just a couple of thoughts on this. I think it's premature to be planning some of these caveats before we have more information. It's very likely that if we were able to start the season, that it may look different from previous seasons. And so before we make any determination about the athletic fees, especially if it's going to be an abbreviated season or there'll be a winter season and not a fall season or vice versa, it's likely the fee could change because the costs change because the program changes. And so I think it's certainly it's cleaner and probably illegal for us to retain fees if the season doesn't happen at all. So I think that's a given that we will return the fees if there's no season. But there may be some modified season, there may be some sudden stoppage of the season. And so I think my recommendation would be for planning purposes, Ellen has built in that the fees are going to be, and the costs are going to be X and the fees are going to be Y, and she's already built that into the budget. So her recommendation is don't change the fees because that's what I've built into the budget. So in the absence of you taking a different vote, that's what'll happen. But I do appreciate everyone's caveats. There are a lot of unknowns around next year for all programs and transportation. And so as it becomes clear to us what those are, then we'll come back to you if we have to make any changes to any of the fee structures. But the purpose in bringing the fees up tonight was to set you up for the one vote, which I think is important because for families who are considering enrolling in preschool or continuing in preschool, they need to know what the tuition will be next year. And so at the next meeting, I would recommend a vote on the tuition. That's the only thing right now I think that we need to take a vote on. I think we can wait until June to vote on the transportation and the athletic fees if necessary.
Chris.
I just want to follow up on Brian's observation and comment about the buses. And I was having a flashback to many years ago when Lori Kirby and I were counting kids getting on after-school buses at Morocco. You remember that? We had some buses that all of a sudden were becoming like overcrowded, and it blows my mind how many kids fit on a bus. And I learned back then that the standard school bus seat is 39 inches wide, and it officially holds 3 little butts. And so, to your point, Brian, like if we have to double the number of buses, I just want to say, I don't know what social distancing guidelines would look like, but I still don't see how we'd even meet them. Like if you doubled the number of buses, I don't know how that might even work. It just kind of depends what the guidelines are, right? So if we still have some really onerous sort of separation guidelines or expectations, I feel like it can almost just blow up the whole transportation world. I don't even know how we wrestle with it until we get some guidance here, but I'm glad you raised the question. I just wanted to suggest, like, I think if we doubled the number of buses right now, we would not still be maintaining the separation guidelines that we have today, but maybe they'll be different in the fall. But I think that's going to be one of the trickiest things for us. Because I'm pretty sure North Suburban doesn't have twice as many buses just sitting idle in a parking lot somewhere either, right?
Right.
So I didn't realize that we were going to wait so long, not so long. I thought we were looking at these and potentially voting these at our next meeting. So if we're looking at more like June for this, then we'll have some more information, and we'll be able to make a more informed vote. So to Judy's point, that's very helpful. Things to think about, but not urgent right now. It's more of a June discussion, but you're right.
And we'll probably have more guidance at that point on, well, hopefully we'll have more guidance on what social distancing might look like, because it might not require double the number of buses based on how we have to plan around kids too. So it would be helpful to know some of those things before we make some of those decisions also.
Yeah,
but I guess
just to be clear, Michelle,
I was going to say, I guess we should focus on the preschool tuition then, and then if anybody has any questions on preschool tuition, since that's what Dr. Evans is looking for us to vote on at the next meeting. So does anyone have any other questions about preschool tuition or increases? Okay. I guess then that is not on our agenda to vote this evening. If anything does come up between this meeting and next meeting, I encourage you to reach out to Dr. Evans or to Ellen and make sure that we can have those questions answered, since we intend to have that on for a vote for the next meeting. The next item on our agenda is the vote to extend the food service contract. I know that Brian and Ellen, Brian is our appointed rep to the food service contract, have been having some conversations about this. Ellen, do you want to update us as to where we are? And Brian, you can jump in as needed.
Certainly. The USDA has provided states the opportunity to take advantage of a nationwide waiver for food service management contracts that were in their final years, which is the case of our contract that we have with Whitson's Food Service Corporation. Because of COVID-19, it has made it very difficult for districts to be able to put out an RFP that would provide potential respondents with the opportunity to go in and actually see a lunch service, as well as to go in and tour our facilities. Therefore, DESE has opted to take advantage of the waiver and is going to be providing districts who are, again, in the final year of their food service contracts with the opportunity to apply for such a waiver, and then basically extend their current food service contract for 1 year to get us through the COVID-19 pandemic and provide a stable food service for districts. So it would just be extending the current contract we have with Whitson's for 1 final year under a waiver from DESE.
Brian, did you have anything else?
I was going to, Ellen just gave all the details. It makes total sense in my mind to not be trying to get a new food service vendor into the mix while we have so many other things on our plate. And since we've been given this opportunity, it makes sense to go with something that we won't have to spend a lot of time thinking about, and adjusting, fine tuning as we move along into next year. So it just makes sense.
Alan, does this keep the same terms as the old contract?
The terms would be the same. As happens every year, Whitson's would go through and adjust their the guarantee that the district gets in terms of secured revenue at the end, but that changes annually when the contract is extended by 1 year. But all of the other terms that were part of the original contract would move forward intact.
Dina,
is there consideration for if food prices change for Whitson's, if things become not feasible for them to continue the services? I'm just wondering if there's any protection for us.
So there is there in our current contract, there is protection for us. And because just Whitson's is a stable food service corporation, and they're a relatively larger food service corporation. Their stability is something that in this type of market, and with what's going on, Dina, is something that actually provides me with some sense of security for us. We're immediately able to transition to providing food service for us on a grab and go basis. And then with very little turnaround, we're able to get everything that was needed in the middle of a shutdown to provide meal delivery services in conjunction with the coalition and Winchester's Got Lunch. So I think that in regards to protecting us, I think that continuing with our current contract would protect us. There's variables in terms of that everyone is looking at in terms of the food supply and everything like that. But I think because of the buying power that they have, and because of all the programs that the USDA is currently rolling out every day, I have emails from DESE about additional things that USDA is providing to districts who are continuing to serve lunches. The priority for the USDA, as well as the priority for DESE food service division right now, is to make sure that our children are continuing to be fed. That is a primary goal, and that through diversions and all of the meal programs that are offered through the USDA, that they are continuing to support all of our food service programs.
So the contract itself has clauses like force majeure, where an act of God.
Absolutely.
If there's a disruption in the food supply chain,
Right. I will go back and recheck the language, but there is language in all of our contracts at standard that speaks to the force majeure. And Zena, I've been very thankful that that you and I had that conversation when you first came on school committee.
Oh, good. Thanks,
because
Ellen.
it made me very much more comfortable as this whole thing unrolled, that knowing that language was in our contract.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
You want a motion?
Yes,
I was going to say, if no other questions, I'm ready to accept the motion.
I move to approve a 1-year extension of the food service contract with Whitson's Culinary Group as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Brian.
Thank you all. I appreciate the support.
Thank you, Ellen.
Fair report. I think I've talked about most of what I need to update you on. Brian and I will continue to meet with FinCom and the town representatives from the town and continue to work on our budget issues. We continue to be happy to support our teachers and our seniors at the high school, and just to the leadership team here and listening elsewhere. We are happy to support you in any way we can in those efforts. And just lastly, again, a huge thanks goes out to all of the teachers in the district during Teacher Appreciation Week. We hope that you continue to feel our love and appreciation, and really grateful for the enormous tasks that you have taken on with such grace and skill. So, and that goes to all of our leadership team, who we also see as our teachers as well, because you are the models for everyone else So thank you to you too. I know that there isn't a leadership team appreciation week, but we certainly do appreciate you as well. Judy, did you have chair report?
Superintendent report. Do we have member report?
Well, can I ask I have a question. I see it under future agenda items. I just want to be sure we don't miss it tonight. Our school choice hearing, which I think we were hoping to, I think Michelle's got a great idea to do it in person if we can pull it off once the social distancing is sort of throttled back on May 18th. But my understanding is that we have to give notice 14 days before the public hearing, and that would be after our next school committee date. And we also have to put notices into the newspaper. So my gut is telling me this should be an action item. I'm thinking we should have some discussion tonight about setting a date and maybe authorizing the chair and superintendent to notify and publicize and organize. I think that last day, Michelle, is it the 29th of May? Is that the Friday? Yeah,
right,
that's
we
Friday.
talked about the 29th of May as the date.
The 29th.
Yep.
So, okay. Oh, so in other words, you're already setting that up for the 29th of May is what you're saying?
Yes. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yep, that was what we had talked about before at the previous meeting, that we were
Oh,
going to
so
try to go
so for future agenda items, you're just saying there is a public hearing and that's what's going to be on the
Correct.
29th. I'm with you now.
Correct. Yep. Right. And
Thank you.
we in lieu of social distancing, we should be able to do it. We should be able to find another way to do it that we've been discussing. So it will happen one way or the other.
Great. Thank you.
So are you ready for the superintendent's report, Michelle?
Superintendent report, yep.
So a couple of things that we're still wrestling with on our end. Transportation remains an issue that's unresolved, related to a number of parties weighing in, including Department of Revenue and negotiated contracts and so forth. So we have 2 contracts for transportation that we have not yet resolved what percentage of that contract will pay, if any, and that's going to come to school committee at the next meeting. One is our out-of-district transportation. The other is in-district transportation. They're 2 different companies. One is managed by the SEAM Collaborative, and then the other is our direct contract with North Suburban. And Ellen has been conferring with colleagues, with the state, with the DESE. I understand there's some legislation that might be involved with the town manager's office, the controller. It's complicated because the companies were keeping the bus drivers on with the idea that we were going to reopen. And now that we're closed for the year, that may have an impact on how much we pay of those contracts. And so just a preview of coming attractions. I'm going to come to you with some more information at the next meeting and a recommendation. The very sad news that St. Mary's School was going to transition to a pre-KK kind of school and no longer run a grade 1 through 5 program may have an impact on our enrollment for the fall. When we looked at the current Winchester residents who attend St. Mary's, I'm not sure how many of them are planning to transfer to the public schools, how many will go to other private schools or other Catholic schools. But it's a fairly large number of students, somewhere between 35 and 45 potential students. Many of those are currently completing the pre-K 4 to 5-year-old program at St. Mary's. I'm not sure how many will stay at St. Mary's for kindergarten. But when you look at the places they live in town, those students primarily live in Lincoln and Lynch and Ambrose, and not so much VO and Morocco. As you know, based on our projections, Ambrose has space available, seats available. Lincoln does not. And at the grade levels where there are groups of kids from Lynch, it may require us, worst case scenario, to add 2 to 3 teachers if we're not going to start the year with average class sizes of 23 or above. And so it's an unanticipated consequence of a very sad event on the part of St. Mary's, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. I have been in contact today with the principal. And so if there are any families who are considering registering in the public schools from St. Mary's next year for K through 5. I would encourage those parents to register as soon as possible. Cynthia Gallagher, our registrar, is ready and able to assist them remotely, and we want to ease that transition as much as possible. So I didn't know if there are any questions on that or concerns.
Dr. Yeah, can I jump in? Is that something, particularly since we're enrolling students in possibly not a grade, you know, they might come in at 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. Could we look at encouraging open enrollment with those families, and particularly with the potential of keeping some siblings together, especially if we have like a 3rd and a 5th grader entering?
So one of the things I'm going to bring you at the next meeting is my recommendations around open enrollment. And it'll really vary by school in terms of where we have available seats. You know that the piece that comes with open enrollment is commitment to stay at the school and also to self-transport. And so that's the other issue for some of these families. I'm assuming that they would strongly prefer to be at Lincoln if it's close to their home, et cetera. And so not a lot of incentive for them to go across town to VO. But I think we can certainly encourage it. But we never know until very close to school how many people actually take the plunge and transfer. I'm assuming that next fall, there'll be very few people who want to transfer because of the uncertainty and having been away from their friends and their teachers this year. And so I'm anticipating that fewer people will take advantage of open enrollment. But this could have a significant impact, and that's the hard thing for people to understand. When I've only budgeted for 3 teachers at a grade level, say at Lincoln, if 7 or 8 additional students transfer into Lincoln at that grade level, that's another teacher, and pretty much without any choice in the matter. And so that's where we're sort of at the state planning stages right now. So I'll keep you posted. The last thing I wanted to share was how impressed I was with the caravan for the seniors on Friday. Didn't anticipate how emotional it would be, and didn't anticipate how many community members without children in the schools came out to support us, waving, holding signs, so appreciative, so loving. And it was just such a special part of this. I know not all school committee members were able to participate. Some people were not in town. I believe Brian Vanalia was able to participate. And he told me he got a little misty-eyed too. And so it was a really special, special day. And I just want to thank everybody who came out to partake. And that's all I have for superintendent's report.
Ask a
Any other
St. Mary's question from Judy.
Sure.
We had some enrollment data back in like 2016 when we were doing the master plan work, Judy, from St. Mary's. Do you know, can you speak to like today, this school year, do you know how many grades 1 through 5 kids they have who live in Winchester or K through 4?
Yes, there were about 35 students who were K to 4, and then another 10 or 12 who are age eligible, who will be age eligible for kindergarten next year, who are currently in their preschool. Actually, Frida went through today, and the list of students we have for 2019-20 at St. Mary's School, we identified which elementary school they would be eligible to attend next year. And so we went through the list, and that's where I did some more recalculations for the to the enrollment projections that I gave you, and saw that at some grade levels, particularly at Lincoln and Lynch, it could push the need for an additional section if all of those students chose to attend. And so that's where I'm a little concerned. I'm particularly concerned about Lincoln.
So that number, just to put it in context, Judy, you've been talking about the 40B off of Cross Street that's just on a fast track towards development. The committee may remember we did some modeling of that a couple of summers ago, and we anticipated between like 89 and 96 kids coming into Winchester, between 33 and 36 at the elementary level. But that's for a project that isn't built yet. But what Judy just learned this week is we have that many kids potentially coming in the fall because they actually are here, because they live in homes. So it's sort of like in terms of impact, it's maybe on the magnitude of an instant 40B overnight. Fair enough?
Fair enough. And they are our students. We would welcome them. as anyone
Totally.
else who's welcome in town. Just have to figure out how to accommodate that.
Brian, I saw your
I-
hand.
Just quick follow-up. I recall back from my elementary days, as a parent, not as a child, that a number of Winchester students went to St. Mary's for pre-K and/or K, and then would come to Winchester either to repeat K or go directly into first grade. And I mean, I can think of 5 or 6 people I know who did this. So, I mean, just something to think about, which we don't really know, is how many of those students were always planning on doing that, at least at the pre-K and K level, and maybe just didn't tell us that, but that was always their plan to do that. So, just a thought.
Right. We should have the enrollment information for anyone and be able to search our kindergarten list for anyone from St. Mary's who has already registered, who's in that circumstance.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Sure.
So the future agenda items we will hear more coming up about the summer program planning update. More hopefully with some guidance from the state on fall 2020 social distance planning. There's already been some thoughts circulating, and I think just waiting for some more guidance on that. We will have the 2020-21 handbook. And as Chris noted, we will have the upcoming public hearing vote on school choice. So we should have next meeting dates as May 19th. We should also have the additional school choice public hearing on the 29th. Looking forward, I know we had an interest in a calendar for school committee for the next year. Brian and I did look forward a bit at the summer. And in keeping the June 2nd and June 16th, our first and third, keeping the,
Sorry.
that's okay, meetings on those dates. And then also potentially looking forward, we had questions about July 7th and the 21st, not knowing whether people may potentially, hopefully be out of town for the 4th of July following on that date. And then August 4th. Those were our first and third as we've been doing. Does
Can you
anybody have
send those
any?
in writing, please?
I can.
Thank you.
So that is what we have on the calendar for now. We certainly can change those going forward if we need to.
One other future agenda item, Michelle, could we do some sort of a check-in on where we stand with the Morocco investigation envelope building systems, right? We talked about DPW doing something. I'd just like to know where we stand on that.
Yep, we can add that to the agenda as well. I think we'd had a standing buildings and projects update on our last future agenda item, but it doesn't appear here, but we can add that on just to keep in our heads, Chris, all of the building projects we have going on as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else for future agenda? Okay.
Just, I didn't get the Zoom this time around, so if I could just be added and make sure that the Zoom link gets to all of us.
Sure, it should always be on the top of the agenda as well that comes to you.
That's what I did. It wasn't, I didn't get an invitation either. I went to the top of the agenda.
Okay. I didn't know that. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And that's for anyone else as well. And so, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good to see you all.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Seeing you. Take care.